Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 73. Tonight, our guests are Kick the Cat. Good evening.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you guys for dropping by.
Yeah. Great record collection.
Thank you. I'm trying, and it's funny. I do this every week and, I got over 500, but, you do this every week. And after a while, it's like, damn, I think I talked about all the good stuff already. I find myself dipping into some questionable stuff occasionally, but, what's one man's treasure is another man's whatever.
You had some classic ones in there. Gentle Giant.
Oh yeah. Love their stuff. Definitely. And that's definitely not their greatest moment, but what the heck, might as well finish the collection. Looks like
yeah.
In the waiting room. Bring him in here. Yeah. All righty.
There he is.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hey, what's up?
How's
Hi,
it going,
John.
Chris?
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you, man. It's been a little while since I saw you.
Yeah.
Doing some cool shows with Umphrey's, I see. Some of these kind of socially distant ones, and
Yes, sir.
looks like you got some more coming up. Is that right?
I mean, as far as Kick the Cat goes, we just have our Fool's engagement in April, and that's it for now.
Okay.
We've got other things happening pretty soon.
Got a few things cooking.
Excellent. Excellent.
Moving
Well,
fast.
definitely want to cover all that. Okay, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for dropping by. I really appreciate it. I was watching the recent show that you guys did online. That was what was that channel called? Instrument Head? Was that?
Oh, Instrument Head Live. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's that like last month, I think it was, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that if anybody's looking to kind of get a sample of what you guys are like at the moment, I think that'd be a good place to start. Do you agree?
Sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, that seemed like a really smoking set. So, yeah, I really liked what I heard. I'm not totally familiar with everything you guys have done, so it was exciting to hear some new tunes that I hadn't heard before. So,
Yeah, we're kind of having a bit of a renaissance, because we've been friends in a band for a long time. So now all of a sudden we're back in it.
yeah,
It's
I
a
was
good
gonna
time.
say, this is like the first time you guys have played with Chris in a few years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been,
Chris has been back in the fold for the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
He left to do Umphrey's, and when was that? Around 2003, 2002, something like that?
2003.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom Hipskin took over, and he's one of our best friends and one of the great drummers in Chicago. And he sort of had to bow out of doing a lot of the gigs when he got the Hamilton gig in Chicago, which he did for about over 3 years straight.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that kind of coincided with Kris Myers really, I think, taking a renewed interest in getting stuff going with us again. And so from that point on, like 4 years ago, we started recording new material. And finally, I think COVID gave us a chance to get this all done and gave us some like energy to put behind the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's the new one called Gurgle. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. When do you think that'll be out?
June 18th.
Okay.
That's what we're looking at.
All righty. Where are we going to get it at? What is there a certain label, or are you going to do it yourselves, or what?
Well, it's looking like right now we have it's going to be released on Bandcamp, and then we're going to eventually get it. We're going to go through there for a while and see how it goes, and then that's going to be the main.
I think we've got a whole bunch of interesting things in the works right now. So we have a couple different potential labels that we're feeling out, and that we're kind of building. It's like Chris said, it's a renaissance for us. So we're rebuilding, and people are getting to know us again, and so it's not necessarily going to be self-released. We'll take whatever help we can get, but we've got some good interest at this point. That we're
Okay,
excited
that's
about.
good. Well, I know the Bandcamp is a great way to get started. A lot of artists that have been on the show have praised it. So, and they let you keep all the money for yourself, which is a nice way to go about it.
Whatever it takes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you should
Yeah, and
get it all. I mean, don't share it. Unless it comes with a label that's going to distribute it all over the world, I guess. Then they deserve a chunk for that. But
Well,
cool.
for what it's worth, our past 3 albums are available on Bandcamp currently.
Excellent. Okay. Well, cool. I wanted to talk a bit about those. So, all right. Let me get going with a few questions I got here. Chris Busby says to say hi to Chris.
Busby.
Yeah, you remember
God.
from Keneally's band at Nearfest.
Oh, right on, right on.
Walked out and played that
Yeah.
the Dolphin Suite. Just
Oh God.
yeah, man, nailed it.
Almost. Thank you. That's generous of you.
Yeah.
That was like one of the hardest medleys to have to learn with his music. It's insane.
Yeah, but just a definitive mic track for sure. You know, one of my favorites. So it was a real treat to see that.
It's at Nearfest.
Yeah, Nearfest. Gosh,
Hell yeah.
going
That
on
was
what,
amazing.
10 years ago now, almost. I think.
Yeah, I was blown away by that whole thing in terms of like who was playing, and you know, just seeing Gary Husband playing after us like was amazing.
Oh yeah,
Meet him.
playing all that UK stuff. Yeah, it was
That's right, with
John
UK.
Wetton,
You know,
John Wetton and Eddie Jobson and Alex Makachek, who can definitely handle some Holsworth when he needs to. You know, he does a great job of it. So, yeah, that was a hell of a set, a great one, very cool. And you know, that was cool about that festival. It was like 10 bands that were very different. You know, a lot of festivals kind of specialize in one kind of flavor all weekend, but Nearfest was like this musical sampler plate from all over the world, you know. And
yeah, I'm missing it. I wish we'd do it. They'd get back into it.
I wish they would too. You know, I think they felt like they had turned over every stone they possibly could when it came to classic 70s guys. But you know, a lot of times passed, you know, old is new again. I wouldn't mind just seeing some repeats at this point. So
yeah, I mean, take a look at Clemente. Old is new again.
there you go. That's our theme tonight. Yeah, that's good. So PETA called and they're curious where you got your name from. No,
man.
I'm kidding.
Well, you know, we get that a lot.
I bet you do. I bet you do. But it's really an urban slang, isn't it?
Well, you know,
Urban Dictionary.
it's one of those things, you know, when for one thing, it's just a name, and obviously we don't kick cats. We have pets, and some of them are cats. In fact, a bunch of the tunes are written about like cats that we've had, or some other animal. It could be a fish, but so people ask us about that, and some people get a bug up their ass about it, and it's like, man, it's the name of the cat.
It's the name of the cat.
Kick is the name of the cat, like Felix the cat.
That's a good way to look at it. Okay.
But someone else pointed out, though, they were seeing our stuff a lot. Like now that we're kind of really making the big push to be on the socials, someone says, "Oh man, I just finally got the metaphor."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, "You're right, it is a metaphor."
Well, it's almost like, just like the guy at the top of the pyramid kind of giving shit to the people below him, almost that old shit rolls downhill kind of thing, so.
Yeah. But, it hasn't been too bad, though. I mean, like, there's only been a few people that are real animal lovers, and maybe they took it the wrong way. And we tried to assure them that no cats are being harmed during the recordings of the tunes. So
definitely, yeah. Well, I knew that, but gotta ask.
It is just a name, and we're owning it. But I think the name came about originally because we had a gig booked, and we didn't have a name, and Chris Clemente gave the name.
What it was is
and it stuck.
I revisited the name. That name was used for like the early Kick the Cat. There was a time where I lived in South Florida, and I had a band that was a bunch of singers, and we played a lot of soul and rock and stuff. And that name was used for a while. So then I just revisited it, but it stuck way more with this band for whatever reason. It worked out. So and people just remember it. So.
Yeah, it definitely jumps out. I mean, as soon as you see it, you're kind of like, what? But you remember it. So that's the way to do it. Okay, cool. So how did you guys meet, and when did you all start playing together?
I guess Clemente could probably start with that because he was the founder of this whole thing from the very beginning.
Chris Siebold, the guitar player, and I met. He's not here right now. He might try and drop in later. He's actually playing a gig right now. And we had met through another drummer friend of ours, Bill Hoffman. And I had met Bill because we had auditioned for like some DJ gig where there was a DJ and he wanted drums and bass on it. But then We're like, this is lame. So like we hooked up with Siebold, and then
This
Siebold
is
and I.
This is like 1993.
Yeah, this is a while ago, and Chris and I, that was back when we had long hair and everything, but we just hit it off. So I had written a bunch of tunes, like handwritten the songs, like I had charts that I had made. It was way before the technology had really caught up with that. And so it really became a thing where it was like I had gone back to school to work on my master's, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to do a recital for the fun of it. And so little by little, then I met Vijay on a gig. We were both playing with a common friend, and we were doing a lot of gigs out in Colorado and everything. And then we all just started hanging out together, and it was like, let's play these tunes. And then there was another guy that was playing drums. I'll just call him Joey Bag of Donuts for now. And but then it didn't work out. And then Chris Siebold, the guitar player, was like, man, I know this smoking drummer, and it ended up being Kris Myers, and he came
Stumpy
in. And,
Joe. Stumpy Joe.
Yeah, Stumpy Joe.
Great
And
look.
so when he came in, and like, because we had already started recording the tracks for these tunes, and then Kris Myers came in and was willing to like help basically revitalize the project back then, because we almost canned the whole thing because it wasn't where we wanted it.
We thought these tracks were dead in the water.
And then Myers
came in, yeah, and did his thing. It was like, okay, we're a band.
Did that album come out of that once Chris was in the fold?
Yeah, that was the first album. That was the Kick the Cat one. I don't know if I wish I had the CD, and it was like people were jumping on board, like helping us, and so like there was like, making us look like cats, even though we're always trying to get away from the cat visual, like it's just a name. Like Pink Floyd doesn't mean they're all pink, they're not.
Right.
Interesting. Pink Floyd was named after a cat.
Well, a cat isn't necessarily an animal either. It could be a dude, So.
Yeah, like a player, right?
Yeah,
Well, knowing Chris Clemente, the band is named after a dude. So.
Unless you go with the metaphor.
Yeah. Well,
kicking the cat, baby.
Take it lots of ways, That's you got options, That's good.
But anyway, that's in a nutshell, basically how it. I mean, there's a lot more details, but we ended up all becoming friends. That was the thing. Mm-hmm. So we had a common goal.
Hey, I think I recognize your microphone. Is that the Bumblebee from Neat?
It is. This thing's awesome, man.
There.
Ah!
Wow,
Yeah.
someone else has the same thing Clemente has.
Yeah,
Well,
man.
I hit some other people to the mic. It's like one of the best USB mics out there, man.
I dig it, man. And the quality of my show just went through the roof as soon as I had a decent mic,
Yeah.
It's
got the little filter,
Yeah, and it has like the music or the voice option depending on what you want to do. Although I have yet to find a microphone that can really handle just sitting here playing the guitar and having it come through cleanly. It's almost like I think an interface where I go direct would be better.
I was doing that, because part of it was, doing some teaching and stuff. It was just easier to simplify the whole thing and not have to plug everything in and set up the interface. And what I do is I'll keep a speaker on the side. So if I'm playing, whether it's guitar or bass,
That's clear as a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just off to the side here. I mean, I only have, usually I kind of place it more so it's not quite off axis and it sounds a little bit better. But it's not bad, I mean, it's picking up the low B.
Sounds great. Sounds better than mine did. Maybe it's something else in my chain that's giving me trouble. I don't know. But I ordered one of those two-channel USB PreSonus things so I could just kind of go straight in and future shows and get a little playing involved. Because
Is that the one with the little blue front on it? Is that the one?
Well, they have a new one that's like the 10th anniversary issue or something that's black, and it comes with all their DAW software and all that other jazz. So I thought, well, for the same price, I could get all the software that goes with it. Maybe do a little recording on the side on my laptop. So we'll see.
The technology's getting crazy, man. So
it is, it is. And this whole Zoom thing has kind of forced us to find ways to let people hear us through here. And sometimes the sound quality is kind of iffy. So any way of getting it to sound really pro and sharp is worth it.
Yeah, what's really funny is, Vijay's got a really nice studio in Chicago, Transient Studios. him and his partner Steve Gillis, they record a lot of everything from rock bands to jazz groups, and he's done some amazing work with some pretty famous people. But like, it's funny, we're talking about the gear, and in the beginning, I mean, I remember like we were like all dealing with like the Digi 001, but then Vijay quickly like started like ramping up the technology. So like pretty much we were doing all the recordings like in-house, like ourselves. I think we had one other friend that helped us, in the beginning, like the first CD was all ADAT.
Right.
Yeah,
so
it was 8-channel ADAT.
Oh man.
Plus MIDI.
I mean, there was a time when people lusted after those things, man. It was like,
Truly.
Well, now we want to lust after, but like we don't even know where the original ADATs are. I think I might have them like somewhere in storage, but then we'd have to find an ADAT
yeah, no doubt,
recorder to like maybe get at the stuff. And then
before we go, we'll give a shout out to Tim Reisig for that.
That's what I was going to say next.
Yeah.
Is Tim Reisig on the second album? He did a lot of the recording and mixing duties as well. And Tim Reisig is of Oprah fame. He won like a Grammy or something for his work doing audio for Oprah's show when it was in Chicago.
Wow. Okay.
So, we all knew him. Like I knew him from being in a school situation too. I think we both went to DePaul. That we both were at University of Miami or something. But man, killing engineer, man. Like that guy,
good sax player,
really good sax player, and there's like a lot of connections because at one point we were all playing in this band at separate times. Yeah, a band called Funk House.
Funk House, yeah, right.
Yeah.
He looked like Gary Willis, bass player from Tribal Tech. That's how I thought.
Yeah, he kind of had that look. Yeah.
Tim was great though. He while he was at Oprah, he got us on the show a couple times. One time, Clemente and he got on to back up
Jennifer Hudson.
Yeah, right when she was nominated for her first Oscar.
Oh, okay.
For Dreamgirls.
Dreamgirls, right?
Yeah. Broke big with that one. Yeah. Did you guys ever see the episode of Oprah where she had Phil Collins on there, and Phil got her to sit down and play the Phil to End the Air Tonight?
Oh no, I never saw that.
Yeah, it's like.
Nice. Did she play it? Was she able to do it?
Yeah, she did it. Not a lot to it, but yeah, it's like, go Oprah. Whom would have guessed? So I was curious, what are some of the early gigs you guys played? What was the typical venue? Were you lucky to have a jazz club whenever you decided to play out, or did you mingle amongst lots of different genres?
We started out, well, I could tell you one story of the first gig I played, the very first gig. It was November, I believe, of 97 or 98 maybe. And we were playing just down from my alma mater for undergrad, which was Elmhurst College. And there was a place down the street called Fun Seekers.
Oh, yeah.
And Fun Seekers was a divey, just ghost land kind of a bar. And the stage was very well built, if I recall. And I went home the next week and told my parents, well, we played this place called Fun Seekers. My dad was like, wait a minute. Apparently my dad used to be a club owner back in the 70s, and he had a place called the Corporation, which was what it was called. It was a discotheque. And it was apparently that's what they called them, I guess. And it wasn't disco, though. It was rock bands. And the bands that he had booked were like before they became popular and famous, were like Rush, Boston, Styx. This was before they ever hit it big, and they were booking these guys in this divey place. I mean, you got to start somewhere, I guess. So then we played there, or we played Fun Seekers, and it turned out that was my dad's old place. I didn't even know it.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
It's a crazy story. Later, yeah, he built that stage, my dad. That was the weirdest thing.
Wow.
Very well, apparently.
And then, after that, we were playing Rumors in bars, kind of that had a nice sort of decor and vibe. And then we started building up from there to like Chicago venues. And now Martyrs is kind of like our home base. Yeah. And Martyrs is, of course,
Yeah, before Martyrs, we had a pretty long-running steady at a really cool club called Lion's Den. Joe Tozer,
yes.
Yeah.
a great patron of Chicago music, owned that club.
And he was a real
played-
kick the cat lover too, so it was awesome.
We played there for a number of years, often double billing with another Chicago fusion prog band led by the great guitar player Ernie Denov.
Oh, I know Ernie. He's a friend of mine. He played with.
You know Ernie?
Yeah, he played with Forrest Gump.
He played Lieutenant Dan band.
That's right. Yeah.
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 He still does.
Man.
Yeah, great player. He also had a band called Bad Dog U.
Which was
Bad
funny
Dog
because
is the band that we used to double bill with for a
so it
couple
was
years.
cats and dogs, you know. It was that kind of
Bad Dog works.
That's awesome. I totally get it. That's neat. Well, hey Ernie, hope you're doing well out there. Yeah, he tunes in occasionally.
And really that venue and that lineup and where we were in our careers at our times, you know, which was our early 20s, getting to double bill with a really established Chicago progressive act like that had an established following and a lot of respect, brought a lot of people out to see us that wouldn't have seen us otherwise. And it's kind of what got I think it was a big facilitator for our careers in Chicago. And I know playing at that venue, I think that's where the Umphrey's guys came out and heard Myers for the first time.
Actually. Yeah, that was
at Lion's Den?
Yep.
Yeah.
They came out after I auditioned in the fall of 2002, and they came, I think, unannounced, if I recall. And then it set break, and there they were. And I was like, oh, this is awkward. No, just kidding. No, it was great. Everyone was cool, and we're all still friends to this day. So
yeah, I mean, it was. I remember that because you know, when Myers got the Umphrey's gig, they were real cool with like the Kick the Cat guys, like me and Vijay and Chris. So like even when they would do like little, you know, you guys would do your side projects. Sometimes I'd find myself playing bass on it. So I was like, that's cool. You know, like we're all in it together. So. Yeah,
I don't know if this is presumptuous of me to say, but I feel like one of the guys I can't remember if it was Joel or somebody said when they came to see us, and they're like they knew that Chris was the right drummer for Umphrey's. They were like, yeah, that's the kind of band we're trying to be. I don't know if that's correct. That's how I like to remember it.
In terms of influences musically, that was what they were into at the time, like more fusion-y kind of artists, you know. And yeah, sure, Billy Sheehan too.
That's right. Eddie Van Sheehan. That's it.
Yeah, too bad about Eddie, man.
No doubt. No doubt.
I was like, I mean, Eddie and Chick within the same year. That's like, I mean, amongst others, there's so many.
And so many. It was just a horrific
year.
It was starting to feel like a repeat of 2016, which seemed like just one blow after the other that year. Bowie and so many other people.
Yeah, Bowie, Prince. Man, there was a lot of them.
There was a bunch. Yeah, 2016, it was just like, all right, Grim Reaper, give us a break here. You're killing all my favorites. So
yeah.
Well, you know, what's cool is like one thing about like in Chicago, you know, Chicago kind of got on that thing where like they like to do like the album series kind of gigs, you know, where someone would learn a whole album. Sure. And so, luckily there's a lot of people that like to do fusion or prog groups, you know. Mm-hmm. And then of course it's always harder when when you write your own tunes, it's hard enough, but when you're learning other tunes, established tunes, you're trying to nail it, and some of them are difficult, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, I was part of a collective here in town for many years that put on a tribute show every month, sometimes two, at this little theater, which was a great setting to do it. And once a year I put on a progressive rock night, and it was great to be able to play, you know, all the, like one year we did the Night of the Epics, and we did like Supper's Ready, Close to the Edge, Tarkus, Starless, all the biggies.
Nice.
And it was great to, you know, find talent in town that are up for it. You know, the prog people, I think, are kind of chomping at the bit to play those classics. And then I thought, well, I'm going to do another show where we do all fusion, you know, and do a Mahavishnu and Zappa and Return to Forever. And I couldn't really find any jazz guys that wanted to do it. It's almost like it's too much work to dissect those songs. So they'd rather just go, play at Chili's playing Autumn Leaves and pick up their check and leave.
Well, you got to have you. I mean, when you're doing the prog stuff, I mean, it's kind of more set in stone. But when you're doing the fusion stuff, there's the jazz element, so you have to really have your soloing together and things like your improvisation together and stuff like that.
Yeah, just like a bigger task than even learning the prog stuff. And the prog stuff's really specific, but there's less improv. So it's.
Because I did do a Gendy's Giant one. In fact, Ernie Dunoff was the guitar player.
Oh, I remember when he did that. Yeah, man.
Yeah, that was me, and there was Tom Hipskin who took over for Myers for a little while, and we were the rhythm section.
Oh.
That was some challenging stuff.
Oh yeah, Ernie said it was some of the hardest stuff he ever had to learn.
And the funny thing was when we did the gig, Green showed up. Man, he came to the gig.
Oh yeah, he kind of lives up that way, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he was like, man, wow, he was real happy about it. Like he said, he thought he
is such one of the nicest people in all of prog rock. He's a great guy. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he said funny things like, I didn't know that's how it went. He goes, man, you guys played it better than we did. And we're like, man.
He can still play that stuff,
I bet.
Yeah, he put together a group that played at Nearfest called Three Friends, which is named after their third album, and played a scorching set of that stuff. I think he had Lee Pomeroy on bass. You might remember him. He wound up playing with Jeff Lynne's ELO, and he played with Steve Hackett and a bunch of people like that.
Yeah. Steve Hackett still sounds great. I saw him a number of years ago when he was out just doing his solo thing, and I forget. Man, I wish I could remember the name of this. He had this singer, man, that was killer.
Blonde, kind of pirate clothes, long
that
blonde
guy.
hair. Yeah, Nad Sylvan.
That's right. That's him, man.
Yeah, he was kind of born and bred to be that guy, to take that gig. He was like in a group. He was in a group for many years that made new music that sounded like old Genesis. So it was like he was a shoe-in.
Right. Yeah, and we hung out with him afterwards, and man, that was a good show too.
Steve's one of the few guys from that time period that still gets better as time passes. I'd say a lot of his peers haven't improved in decades, but he continues to. Very fresh techniques and ideas on his records, and he's really consistent too. He puts out a record like every year. It's like
that's amazing.
Yeah, if anybody loves the classic Genesis and that progressive stuff, he's the guy that picked up the torch and ran with it. Don't call Phil Collins for that stuff. So,
yeah, he went in a different direction.
Yeah, definitely, and that's great.
So cool. Yeah.
That's always like an interesting challenge for us. Like as far as like being composers, like when we're coming up with material, there is the tunes that are kind of more proggy, and then there's the ones that are more fusion. So we're trying to mix it up. When we and it's nice to actually play like slow tunes, like ballads. Like Vijay wrote this killing tune that's on the new CD or new album, I should say. That man, it's one of my favorite tunes on there. I can't wait for people to hear it.
The bass feature.
Great. What's it called?
Well, here you can see.
Plus I get to play fretless bass on it, which is nice.
Sure, that's always.
I will say, to that point, I think one of the cool things about this band is we, each have a different background. Obviously, I'm probably more from a jazz classical background. Broadly speaking, Chris Clemente's, I think, tries to bring more of the funk groove element to it. Chris Siebold is like the Zappa prog. He can do anything, but I think that's the sensibility he brings to it. And so it's kind of interesting us coming together. It's not a prog band. It's not a fusion band. It's definitely not a jazz band, but it has all those elements in there.
Sure, like a unique hybrid of all of that.
Yeah. And it's distributed differently on the different tunes.
Yeah. So it's like we're always riding the edge of the wave, especially, man, like when Myers and I are, trying to lay it down under these solos, but at the same time, getting creative. It's, it's fun. It takes on its own life, like I only play that way when I play with these guys, if that makes sense. Like,
sure,
I mean, like I play a bunch of different styles, but when there is definitely like a kick the cat thing that happens with the dynamic of the four of us when we get together, without a doubt.
Sure. So. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about your early influences. Like, who inspired you to play bass in the first place, and who were some of your early ones even before you got into jazz per se?
Well, since you asked, about bass, for me, there was a lot. My mom and dad listened to a lot of music, so part of it was listening to the stuff they play. Everybody does that, right? There, you play with your parents.
You just hear it around the house,
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, like if I had to pick, like the earliest influences, there's really kind of like maybe 2 or 3 in there. One of them was Earth, Wind and Fire for me.
Sure, Verdine's awesome.
Man, it's like so when I'm playing, like even if it's like a groove oriented thing, a lot of it's coming from him, and it's one of the reasons I like playing slow tunes also, because they can do that and still kind of make it groove.
Sure.
The other one, early one, was of course Rush for me.
Sure.
But my first album was Hemispheres.
Okay, well, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, and then I was also like I was into the Police early on.
Oh yeah.
So there's that influence, and that's because it's Sting, so he's playing and singing at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and that was always So if I had to pick the earliest ones, it would probably be those 3.
You know what Sting said? He said, "It's not a chord until I play a note." You ever heard that?
That's how it works.
That's right.
It needs a root to be a chord.
Pull it
Yeah.
in any direction. Look out,
I could change the whole thing with one note.
That's right. You go from happy to sad, jazz to something else.
You can go through that whole thing in your Steely Dan theory class.
There you go. Yeah. Let's do that. Well, like I said, I don't want to get too long-haired about it, but I'm looking forward to digging into those songs and kind of seeing how they're put together.
And Vijay, I don't know what I never really thought about this. Like your early influences. I mean, I saw some videos. You were playing guitar.
I mean, I didn't get into jazz and really rock music until a lot later. I mean, I didn't start playing jazz until I was halfway through college, really. But I grew up playing classical music, and like my parents had, theater and classical stuff playing around the house. That I grew up playing classical piano, and then when I got into junior high, I started playing electric guitar. I started taking electric guitar lessons and got into Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it was actually my guitar teacher in Damian Smith, whose band I ended up playing in a few years later, that I met Chris Clemente through.
Oh yeah, we used to travel to Colorado all the time just to play gigs because Damien just loved Colorado, so we'd always travel there. And then he moved there; he stayed.
Yeah, but Damien, through playing electric guitar, kind of turned me on to Jeff Beck and Mike Stern and Mahavishnu and John McLaughlin and Alan Holdsworth and some of that stuff. He was not like a big fusion guy, but he was my first introduction to that stuff. And so I kind of came to the table I came to jazz through fusion, through guitar fusion. And it's at a certain point, and I think when I got into college, I was starting to meet guys like Siebold and these others. Like, I'm not really a guitar player. These guys are guitar players. I need to I need to bank on the skill set I grew up with, which is keyboards. And so that's when I started getting into jazz and into this other stuff. And I think I really brought that guitar aesthetic. I try to bring that guitar aesthetic to the keyboard stuff I do.
Yeah, there's some tunes where it starts out with a keyboard solo, and Vijay is, he's a synth master that at first you're like, whoa, that's some cool guitar. That's a cool guitar opening riff, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, that's a synthesizer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me. I had David Sanctius on a week or two ago, and he's equally adept at both keys and guitar. And that was one of the questions: is how did the guitar affect your phrasing on the synth? And he's like, huge, big influence. The pitch wheel and all that. It's.
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of some other players like Jan Hammer that kind of had a similar kind of thing going on.
100%, yeah.
Didn't George Duke have a whammy bar on his synthesizer? Was that George Duke? Am I thinking that he had that big
stick?
That giant whammy bar on his keyboard.
I've seen it on a clavinet.
Yeah. I think it was on a clavinet.
Yeah, which is a bizarre thought that somebody even thought it up. I want to put a whammy bar on this keyboard. But it works. Like it looks crazy. It's like
You used it.
Looks like you're ironing or something.
But I mean, well, I've just got 2 points to what you're saying. Like guitar, like it became clear early on, like as a keyboard player, you're not going to come across to the audience with the same effect as the guitar player, just playing the piano. You know what I mean? There's a certain power, there's a certain thing of the lead line of a guitar.
Well, yeah, just a lead synth kind of line. Like I've played some shows with my group, and I have kind of an instrumental. I wouldn't call them fusion, but I don't know. We sound I don't know, a little like Rush meets Return to Forever, I guess, with some Steely Dan thrown in there. And our original keyboard player played a lot of gigs where he just played Rhodes, and it was nice, but it's almost kind of like it doesn't really grab your attention and make you go, look at me, I'm soloing. It's just this kind of polite in the background kind of texture. And once we got a guy that had a full rig with synths and all that, it's like it really jumped out in a nice way.
I say that, and then you hear Chick Corea play, and it's like,
you're right. Well, yeah, there are exceptions, and it all depends on
the
density of your outfit too.
Yeah.
Just trying to leave the room so you can hear it nicely. Yeah.
But it's interesting about David Sanchez too. These guys have been giving me a lot of crap because I like to have one keyboard in front of me that I lay all my shit out on, do my splits, and David Sanchez is a one keyboard guy.
Yeah, that's really refreshing, opposed to the Rick Wakeman 10 keyboards.
Power.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he'd literally do
Emerald
that too.
power.
Like, he'd play this one and he'd have one way over here.
I mean, it looked great. It looked amazing, but it's almost like I've got 10 presets, but I'm not going to MIDI. I'm just going to have a board for every one of them,
Right.
This song or whatever. I mean, it looks cool, but boy, I wouldn't want to set all that stuff up.
I would imagine part of it is for the look of it though, too, to have it. Because he used to wear that big kind of like cloak.
Oh yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
He said,
Great look.
The reason,
the whole thing about it too is the purist, mentality as well for keyboardists wanting to use like a B3, like an actual B3 with a full, with the Leslie and everything, and an actual Rhodes.
Yeah.
They insist on it,
Well, 20 years ago, I would have been down for that, but Nord came along and really made those emulations legit. So it's suddenly like, why drag all that around when you've got it all right here in one keyboard? But 20 years ago, it was, more of a Doogie Howser Rhodes that you'd get.
Doogie Howser Rhodes.
Yeah. Oh, from the DX7, yeah.
That awful sound, I mean, very dated, I mean, at the end of the day, you want that classic Rhodes sound with that kind of skronk to it when you hit it hard, and you almost feel the wood in the mallet hitting the tine and all that, it's, I think the Rhodes really the Nord really nailed it. It seemed like people were trying for many years, and then finally it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Well, on the new album, I'm using probably half Nord Rhodes, and then I started switching over and tracking on my real Rhodes. It's like I'm gonna do all the rest of the shit on my real Rhodes. I mean, the Nord's great. Nord is great, of course.
Yeah.
There's nothing like the real thing, though. And it's not just how it sounds; it's like the feedback it gives you while you're playing.
Well, there's a physical, the mechanism of being physical is really a big part of it too. Things moving around in there.
Velocity, the air, the weight.
That's what we spent a lot of time on these last recordings too. I mean, like over the years, in the beginning it was like just play quartet, go, but now over the years, like not aside from developing like maybe our playing or our technique and stuff, a big part of it is like the tone part of it. The soundscaping is like really gone through the roof for us compared to what it was in, say, the beginning. I mean, like we're just more aware of it.
Sure. Well, I think that's a lot of the fun of crafting a studio album is just the textures and colors that you can layer on there.
Well, yeah, because Kris Myers was like, I mean, he has done some really amazing like drum production.
The Nord work he does is brilliant.
Well, I'm talking about Myers here, like with some of the drum production stuff that's happening along with like him actually playing. It's like
talking about producing a record and layering it and doing that whole thing. I think we all, each individually, took a lot of care on our own parts to do that. And now, as the album came first, as it often does, now we're getting ready to present the stuff to the world. We're all taking what's on the record very seriously and trying to represent that with what we can do in our live show.
Yeah, that's a whole other challenge, but like it seems
including a lot of this amazing electronic drum stuff that Myers did on his record. Now he's finding ways to pulling off doing it live.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, we last chat, you just gotten those new triggers and stuff.
Yeah, DAWs pads, DAUZ.
How are those? Are those working well for you?
Fantastic. Yeah, they were expensive, but I wouldn't hold anyone back from getting them, because you need one that's going to last if you're a real like a touring player. It's great for touring musicians. It's road friendly, user friendly. They're actually, what's interesting is I believe I was told by the owner, Dan Dawes, that the pads came from originally the material that was the Super Ball bounce balls that when you're a kid, Super Balls.
Sure. Oh yeah, those things like you bounce them, they like go like 5 stories up in the air.
And I think that business either it went out of business or it was sold, and I think Dawes got a certain share of it, and got the materials to make the pads out of the Super Ball material. So yeah, interesting.
Flubber.
But like, what's great is I learned about the Dawes pads because originally, well, I guess Neil Peart used them, and he's one of the heaviest hitters that ever lived. I mean, in terms of like actual striking the drum and doing a full marathon show. And if he can use it and it lasts, then anyone can use it. And but Nine Inch Nails was actually my first introduction to the Dawes pads. When I've seen like all their tours, most of them, and they used it on the most recent one when they were Lollapalooza. Well, not recent, but 2013, I think, or 12.
10 years ago. A little less.
Yeah, and that was a cool setup where they would start out with the conceptual idea of having people on stage with like just one light, pads, and then Trent playing, I forget what the device is, and then the drummer would come out and he'd be standing up playing those Dawes pads, and that's when I first learned about them. So yeah, because I was using Roland products. Most drummers do, because it's super user friendly, and it's just this one square box with like 9 pad presets or custom ones you want to put in. But the fidelity it's not very stereo, 16-bit.
Yeah, was that like the Octopad or like what evolved from that?
Maybe.
Well, I mean, I remember when King Crimson, when Bruford was using Simmons pads.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I bet he had to have some spares just in case, because I hear that stuff wasn't super dependable, So
yeah, and plus back then, I mean, they weren't velocity sensitive. It was like you just hit it.
Oh, it's true. I interviewed him many years ago, and I said, what came of that? And he goes, well, it kind of destroyed my ability to be subtle. I had to go relearn how to play jazz drums after whacking those things so hard for 10 years. Which is interesting. And that was a really cutting edge sound, back in King Crimson. The whole band was about new technology, guitar, synth, and stick. Mm-hmm. Great. And then Bruford kind of brought them along to the Yes reunion, and they really didn't sound that good in that setting. All of a sudden you got this machine gun snare coming from out of nowhere in the middle of Close to the Edge, and you're just like, man, stop that.
Yeah. Well, luckily now they have good velocity and sensitivity now, the pads and all the samples made with all the sound modules you can use.
Yeah.
If you get a good one, and or even make your own samples, you can do that. Like Peter Gabriel's drummers, and his more recent and the later tours that he did, the drummer, I can't remember who it was. Not from the 90s. I mean, like, no, someone even after that, like in the 2000s era, he was using his own custom samples that sounded unbelievable. Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
Only the best for that guy.
Right. Even Alex Van Halen was using Simmons for a while. I might have been on the 5150
tour, baby.
Yeah. Well, he had that rotating drum set thing.
Is
There were
that the
three
one
drum
where,
sets.
like the drums were in a circle and they just kind of flew him in from the rafters and dropped it on it?
That was that era.
Technology
There.
for triggering those things I've heard was about as sophisticated as a doorbell, basically.
Well, yeah, guys were making them. They would just get a plank of wood. They'd put the piezo, tape it on there, and put a piece of rubber over there, and they'd be and hit it, and it'd be like, yeah, it works.
Yeah, the early industrial bands show that too, in the industrial era of the Chicago scene from the 90s. I mean, the technology's really advanced, and it's really sad that that particular movement hasn't really evolved from the 90s, because those guys were ahead of the curve, like, Al Jorgensen and, like a lot of the, Pigface and all those guys, Martin Atkins, and they were using what they could at the time to create this artistic movement. And then it all of a sudden just kind of stopped by like a certain era of the 2000s, in my opinion. And it's sad because, I mean, now by then technology's really evolved for all players, and that particular genre is what it is. But,
yeah. Even the technology of us using the in-ears now. I mean, when back when we would play, we played so loud, man. Like we were like easily one of the loudest bands in Chicago playing, and then we were playing Fusion to boot.
In bars.
Oh my God. I remember I had to get, actually, it was actually this bass. I got this bass just because I knew it could cut through a wall of guitars and keyboards and drums. Just so you can hear it. Like it had that higher mid-range, punch.
And that's Warwick, right?
This is a Warwick.
You're a Warwick endorser, so
that was a while ago. I'm playing other basses. I just happen to have this one out right now.
Yeah, what's the one you have on the most recent show that you guys did on, what was that, instrument head? It almost looked like a Rickenbacker kind of shape.
That's a Sarek. Jake Sarek is a luthier in Chicago, and his stuff has really taken off. And when I first saw his stuff, someone hit me to the fact that, like, man, this dude's in Chicago. So I went over there, and it turns out we had some common friends too. And basically, like, I want this bass, this scale with these woods, and he was like, no problem. And then he made it. Man, it's actually my main bass. That one that you saw, it is kind of has a Rickenbacker look to it for sure. Yeah,
it does,
that's it's a short scale too. It's like 30.5.
Yeah. Why do you prefer the short to the long?
Well, I'm not a really big guy or anything, so plus there has been a wave of that happening. So like my I even made one that's like Warwick gave me a neck that's a 32-inch neck, 32-inch scale neck, and I eventually cut a body and like dropped some pickups in there, and that one's gets used a lot in Kick the Cat now too because it has a nice tone.
Have you ever tried the U bass?
Yeah, the ukulele bass with the kind of like rubber strings.
Well, there's different kinds. There's rubber. There's ones with metal strings. Actually, my bass player is kind of an instructor on YouTube that specializes in U basses, and he's brought a few to some gigs, and it's like, damn, that thing, if I shut my eyes, it almost sounds like a short scale bass. It's
kind of that thing about like the technology of it. But for me, it's like at one point, it still has to have a certain feel, a tactile feel to it where it doesn't feel like super duper small.
Right.
It has to at least feel like substantial. But, how it is. I mean, you got some guitars, man. It's like, it's almost like a never ending thing. Like either you're customizing them or you're finding something else to play. And forget it, for keyboards, you're for sure doing that because the technology keeps changing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, some guitars just kind of follow me home like dogs. Seriously, something just find me. I had a friend that called me. He's like, I want you to buy this guitar. It's like, I don't need another guitar, but I wish it worked tomorrow. $100. It's like, oh, fuck it, bring it over.
I wish Chris Siebold was here with us, man. He's got a nice collection of guitars, man, that sound really good.
Yeah, the one on that clip is amazing. The green one with the
the G&L.
Yeah.
That's
what he's had forever.
Sounding really sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, he likes to use that one a lot on the Kick the Cat stuff. He was saying he uses it more for Kick the Cat than he does for other things. Just the way it works out.
Yeah. So, Chris, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about working with Kanye West. I noticed that on your resume, and I thought, well,
yeah. It was they were doing it was just a one-off. There's these guys in town that have a group called Tributosaurus, and that it's a very similar kind of thing where like for every month, they used to do a different tribute, and they would do everything from The Who to Yes, to whoever. But I would play with those guys sometimes, and we were doing the Chicago Music Awards, which kind of like happens right before the Grammys. So they were giving awards to like Chicago-based people, and Kanye's one of them, right? Kanye, and also Cheap Trick, and then also the Plain White T's were there. So I was in the house band, and there's a picture somewhere, I have it somewhere, where you could see me. I'm standing in back of Kanye, and we were just basically playing a groove, and he was doing his thing. But as much flack as that guy gets for all the craziness, the one thing I can say is that like the charismatic part of that guy, like when he walked in the room, man, like the gravity shifted, like
right.
Everyone's like, to where he was, and and he's good at what he does, man. I mean, like,
Yeah, he's got a vision, I mean,
And I think back then too, I forgot what year that was, but he wasn't quite as crazy as he is now. Like he had a lot of nice things to say back then. It wasn't political or any of that stuff. So he was
he's cutting pretty
he was
wild.
he was very appreciative of his situation back then,
Yeah. How about Percy Sledge? How'd you hook up with him? That's the When a Man Loves a Woman.
Well, that's his big hit.
Yeah.
So
That was
that's
Michael Bolton.
Well,
yeah, right.
Celebrate his whole catalog.
yeah.
Well, that one was the group I had when I was in South Florida for a while. This one agent used to do a lot of those kind of gigs where it was with these kind of I don't know what you call them, like
Legacy
they were
acts.
like, yeah, like legacy acts. That's what it was. And Percy Sledge was one of them. So he came in, and my band was like, all right, we'll back him up. And it was like one of those things where like, he was just didn't have it together. He wasn't organized, like, so we just basically learned the tunes off the his recordings. He says, I'm going to do these songs. And then when it came right down to it, when the show, like the rehearsal went great, and then when we did the show, now I don't want to like bad rap him, but I'm just gonna say like when he showed up, I think he had a couple scotches,
Okay,
Nice.
just for accuracy's sake, right?
And so make a long story short, like he killed that tune,
Yeah.
but like I can't say the same for the other tunes. Like it was just like. But like his hit, like he killed it, and that was really the main thing.
The one everybody wanted to hear, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
I can't
he was
name another song by him, honestly. So
me neither. Like there were these other tunes, we learned them, and we just went for it. We followed them, and that's what we did.
Some good interviews with him on that Muscle Shoals documentary.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that.
yeah.
it's a great documentary, absolutely. So Vijay, I was wondering if you could tell us about playing with Chuck Berry.
It's so funny. I was gonna just bring that up. That's crazy.
And first, I got to ask: have these guys ever pressured you to change your name to Chris, just so everybody in the band?
No, I think they like having the black sheep of the group.
I tell everyone
The
that
outsider.
Vijay is Chris in Indian.
That's it.
Yes. The Sanskrit word for Christopher. Well, the Chuck Berry thing is interesting, and it's kind of a long story. I'll try to give a condensed version, but at Transient at the studio, we've had a relationship with the iconic Chicago punk band Naked Ray Gun. They've been friends of us along the way. They helped us build the studio. They've recorded a couple records with us. My partner Steve just mixed and their new record mixed their new record, which is about to come out. So their manager put on Riot Fest in Chicago for a number of years, and he brought Chuck Berry to the Chicago Theater. It's been 10 years now. It was New Year's Day 2011, I believe. And through that relationship, Chuck Berry, it's well documented through all the stuff. He never travels with the band. He's got all sorts of hijinks.
Right. He just shows up, pulls his guitar out of the trunk of his car, and walks on stage.
Exactly.
Demands his cash up front.
Yes.
Sure.
Before hitting the
It's
stage.
all true, and that's how we got the gig to do it, and that's all the same stuff that happened. But now, he was 84, 85 at that time, and he had just come. I had heard this. I don't know if this is true, but he had done a show New Year's Eve the night before in New York, and he was all upset because the people weren't there to meet him at the airport in Chicago. It turns out that he had gotten on the wrong plane somehow. He got to the airport, and through the weight of his personality, he was like, "Yeah, I'm Chuck Berry. I'm going to Chicago." They let him on an earlier flight without a ticket, so there was no one there to let him, no one there to pick him up at the airport. So he was a little agitated about that. But we didn't have a rehearsal with him. We did a sound check with him. Everything was going great. Steve, my partner, actually had driven down to St. Louis to hear him at his club the prior month. So we knew all the tunes he was going to do. We knew his set list. We knew that the keys that he changed. Not that he had a set list, but we knew the keys he was doing stuff in now as compared to the original keys he did them in. We had gotten together and practiced them, made sure we were all on the same page about the stuff. And, he was, all the stories you've heard are true. I don't like Clemente said, I don't want to badmouth him, but, long story short, the guitar was going out of tune. He handed me the guitar and told me to play it, which essentially meant I should go tune it. So I was tuning the guitar. He was playing the keyboards, and I don't know what medical condition happened, but he ended up collapsing, passing out on the keyboard. Ooh. And the show, and this is all like in front of 4,000 people. It's well documented. It was pretty crazy thing. So,
didn't he have a stroke?
I'm not
that's
a doctor, so I'm not qualified to say, but I don't think he did.
Oh, I don't know if that's
based on what I saw backstage afterwards.
But that was pretty much the end of that set, I imagine.
Yes, pretty much the end of that set. So it was a great experience, honestly. And having done a million gigs, a million jazz gigs, a million of all sorts of different types of gigs where you've got to roll with the punches and go with the flow. It really, really set me up to kind of go with whatever was thrown at me in that situation. Which, there's so many people that have backed him up that have a similar story.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard it before. So
you got to play with a guy who created rock and roll, man.
Exactly. I was telling these guys when we were down there. There was a thing in the New York Times a couple of years ago. Like 300 years from now, who are they going to remember about rock and roll? It's probably not going to be the Beatles. It's going to be Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
Well, he should have called his cousin Marvin to come in.
You know that new sound you've been looking for?
Keep up. Try to keep up.
Well, listen to this.
Yeah.
Classic scene.
Riding along in my automobile.
Yep.
Right. Well, that's wild. And I noticed on your resume you also have done Wicked and Lion King. Have you done some of these big shows that are put on there in Chicago, kind of like Broadway but not Broadway?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, those are all shows that have, they're national tours that end up being parked in Chicago for a while. And I'm not, that's not primarily one of the things I do. There's a lot of guys that specialize in that sort of thing a lot more than I do. But I have to say that playing in pit orchestras, doing those kinds of things, it's just one of the most important experiences I've had as a musician, just in terms of the concept of blending with what's happening around you, different than a way a rhythm section player typically has to blend. Typically, it's kind of like, you know, bass player, drummer, rhythm section guy, guitar, keyboard, you know, we're all there. We're going to phase lock to each other. You know, we got to get the groove happening. We're going to nail our parts. Our 16th notes have to be felt the same way. We're swinging the same way, whatever. This is a completely different thing. You're dealing with a conductor. You're dealing with stuff speeding up and slowing down. You're dealing with wind and violin players that have like a different sense of time. And to really do a great job in that, because you're not playing piano, you're playing usually some synthesizer part that's blending with some other thing. It was really a great experience to have to kind of split my brain to like, oh my God, I gotta let loose of some of these, you know, typical tendencies of this phase lock rhythm thing, and let my brain, part of my brain, relax and go and think about blending with this. And it was just a real important lesson as far as, you know, especially in terms of how well you have to know the music to let yourself be pulled in these different directions in the moment.
That's another thing, yeah.
Which show did you like the music for better, between Wicked and Lion King?
Well, I did a lot more of the Lion King, and they're both excellent, exceptionally well written shows. And, you know, as a keyboard player in those contexts, it's not really about, it's not like which do I enjoy. It's like not which music is better. It's kind of like which book do you enjoy playing better. And the Lion King book was a lot more fun to me. The Wicked book was really hard.
Right.
Really
It
hard.
was wicked.
It was wicked.
It was hard to relax.
Wicked hard.
So, I mean, it's not like, you know, it's not like what do you like better, you know, which music do you like better. It's kind of like, well, what is your experience playing this compared to your experience playing that? It's not, it's less about the big picture of the thing that you're doing and more about your individual experience with it, you know.
Sure. Very cool.
So
Chris, how did your kit differ with Kick the Cat versus Umphrey's?
Well, it's smaller. It's the same. It's basically the same setup with 2 racks toms and 2 floor toms. It's one I like to use pretty much for a lot of different, you know, things and occasions. But the sizes are different a little bit. I'm starting to use with Umphrey's a 13-inch second rack tom, and now 16 and an 18 for floor toms. It's getting bigger and thuddier for the bigger rooms. But for Kick the Cat, it's 10, 12, 14, 16. And cymbal setup, it's pretty close to the same. Pretty close to the same. And I have an auxiliary snare drum on the left. And I swap between this little popcorn 10-inch and then a piccolo, a brass piccolo. Yeah. So I just kind of, it's pretty similar, actually. Yeah.
You ever use the extra snare kind of like a timbale wannabe thing?
Not really. I just kind of do the piccolo on the left. And if I need to use it in that sort of fashion, I'll just turn off the snares and go to town. Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically it's pretty much Snareville for me.
Yeah.
I'm all about snare drums and you know, a really clean kick and then, you know, a crisp 10-inch rack tom, kind of like what Stuart Copeland had with his really snappy rack tom sound, and then get thuddier, you know, more low end with and more maple warmth in the floor tom region. So I guess that's how I would describe it.
Very cool.
I remember when Myers, we did we used to play in this live drum and bass group called Drop Q, and you didn't have any toms. You had all snares.
Yeah, there's no reason for toms for drum and bass at all.
But you had like 3 or 4 snares.
I did. And when I do, you know, any kind of electronic based or EDM based gig, which I rarely do, but if I do, I'll have like where the tom is, rack tom, I'll have another snare drum. I'll have another snare drum here, snare drum there, just for different sizes, as opposed to sampling all that, because you can still get you know, capture the authentic, you know, funky breakbeat sound.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was nice to set up too.
Where did you guys record the latest album? When did you get to it? Start on it before COVID hit, or was it all done remotely, or what?
Who wants to answer this one?
It started before COVID, like
yeah.
a year before COVID. We started the first few
Years
tracks.
before.
Like 4 years before.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been working on this record for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, we've been, you know, I've got at my studio in Chicago, Transient Sound. That's sort of been the place that we've been getting together and starting to build the tracks up. But you know, as COVID happened, and you know, we're all in our different parts of the world, and we've all got our home recording setups. We after getting the basic tracks, we basically built up everybody's individual stuff on their own, and then I mixed it all at Transient.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So solos were usually done at everyone's respective home studio. I know for bass, like I did some of the bass over, but some of it there's a couple of them where it's like it's from the original.
I'd say
tracking.
probably half the bass tracks are from the original.
From the original one at Transient.
Yeah.
Just worked
Drums
out.
were mostly from Transient, capturing the room, the roomier sounds, but the tighter, more drier sounds, I end up replacing, I think, for some of the songs, sections here in my home studio.
Yeah, we did on Gurgle and Hairbrained.
And we were kind of going for that 70s tight, you know, or not tight, but like 70s dry sound with like a thuddier snare, looser, deeper. Yeah.
How far is Nashville from Chicago?
It's an 8-hour drive.
Okay. So
You can go either up Illinois on 57 or 58, or you take 65 through Indiana, and it's miserable. And you can get there quicker. Yeah.
I suppose COVID's kind of put a wrench in everything at the moment, but do you foresee any logistical issues living in Nashville and everybody's in Chicago?
No, it's been surprisingly going very well. I think the guys are happy. I'm really happy that they're willing to drive down here.
We were just there last weekend.
They were just here last weekend. In
What's such
fact, Clemente was just over here in this corner twerking right here. He was twerking, and we were having a dance party. Yeah, it's great.
film at 11?
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I feel like with the first of all, Kris Myers' whole family's in Chicago, so he's back home regularly, and we can schedule stuff around his visits. But I think with the stuff that we have coming up and some of the opportunities that we have, it almost kind of doesn't matter where we live.
Okay. Very cool. Can you talk a bit about the Chicago music scene and how diverse it is and how it's kind of changed over the years? I mean, there's so many different fads. It's great that you're playing fusion in such a hip town, you know, culturally, because if you're in Atlanta, you'd have a lot less options.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are original bands, and there's a lot of everything. So I mean, you know, Chicago's known for blues, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Sweet
that still
home Chicago.
exists. There's a lot of jazz players, and you know, it'll be interesting. You know, it's funny because we're talking about a scene that will eventually be a post-COVID scene. So like, which clubs are going to be able to still be there? You know, like what is the scene going to be really?
Yeah.
But as far as like what it was, I mean, you know, luckily for us, I mean, like we're on the scene. There's different scenes, but we were playing a lot, you know.
I think also like some of it has to do with industry related things too. The record label industry being one of it, you know, like this was one of the major cities of the US. So, you know, when back when there were record labels having money and giving money, practically throwing money at artists, there was a lot of cultures and movements based around record labels in Chicago. It could be anything from pop to R&B to gospel to electronic house music to metal music to grunge to underground music. Like Tortoise is a really interesting band. The Thrill Jockey was a record label for them, and it's just a one of a kind of city. It has an authenticity about it, but I really don't know if that's really there as much anymore as it used to be. You know, for one, there's a lot of authenticity in the city, but I think it goes, you know, without saying, and the musicians are also, you know, world class in some levels. It's just, I think that it's changed a lot, maybe because of socioeconomic reasons. Who knows?
My take on the scene here is, it's a yin and yang sort of thing. I mean, there's not a lot of record industry here. It's not known. We're not a niche town. We're not like Nashville, which is a country town. We're not LA, which is kind of like commercial film. I mean, there's also, I don't want to pigeonhole these places, but I mean, the fact that Chicago is what it is, it's a smaller market, and I feel like there's a lot of corporations here. There's a lot of private parties. There's a lot of corporate stuff that happens.
Right. You can make a living as a musician in Chicago if you're like
and the
at the top of the food chain.
The upside of that, the downside of that is that there's not as much focus on, the next level of the industry and on art the way there is in some other markets, like New York and things like that. But the upside of that is that guys like us that are playing 3, 4, 5 nights a week in all different styles of music, I mean, we're constantly flexing these different muscles of the different parts of our brain musically. And I think that's a huge asset when it comes to playing the kind of music that we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's like we're playing in Brazilian bands, we're playing in Latin bands, we're doing
church gigs.
Yeah, the gospel thing in Chicago is a huge influence. I mean, it's massive. So I think the fact that it's so diffuse is a problem in terms of the fact that it's not real industry centered, but you could use it to your advantage and really let it fuel your musicianship if you allow it to.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the meantime though, like over the decades, like Vijay said, I feel I've always kind of looked at it as an original, like the Second City has been. It's like since the Prohibition era, some things I guess may have never really changed here, and it's a working town. It's an industry town. So what that means for music is maybe playing society gigs, on weekends to like Chris Clemente was trying to say, I think was you can go play the Drake, hotel, and that's been around since the 20s and even before that. And it's still there playing weddings, bar mitzvahs and corporate parties.
Yeah. And it's big money.
And it's a big
money.
industry.
And you're playing with some amazing musicians on these gigs.
Yeah. It's like, you might be playing with Steve Rodby or not. I shouldn't use him as an example, but
he does those gigs.
He's so world class, but like, a producer or a famous person that's on a ECM record label or something, just playing a wedding gig with you just every now and then in Chicago, Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like a small New York, but in some ways,
big little town.
Well, I think that corporate loop's a great one to be in because, you could make a heck of a lot more than just having a cover band,
Right.
Well, that's some of the funny. That's some of the funny conversations I would get into. Someone would see me playing and Kick the Cat or something, and then you get to talking, and then I'm like, yeah, man, and I played some weddings, and I was like, man, I would never play weddings. And it's like, well, why not? I go, what are you playing? And they're playing in bars, playing cover tunes, and I'm saying, I'm playing cover tunes and making 10 times as much money.
Yeah, I mean,
and everyone's dressed to the T's, Like,
I mean, it is a cover band, but the whole mindset is completely different. It's much more professional.
I think it's just more humbling. I mean, I think even like when I think of going to college at Elmhurst, it's a unique program in that the school didn't provide a lot of money into funding. I hope I'm not getting in trouble saying that, but the truth is, and most schools don't do that, So like, our director there for jazz studies had to make us learn the real, School of Hard Knocks way by earning our money by playing society gigs at age 18. I had no social life, wore a tux every weekend to play downtown, and the money would go, and the money would go towards the funding of going to play the Montreux Jazz Fest or Umbria Jazz Fest or North Sea Jazz Festival. Mm-hmm. Because Doug had an in on that, Doug Beach, the director, who's,
he's retiring. He's retiring this year, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And so anyway, yes. So I think that what you learn is how to be humble, because sometimes when you're playing these jobbing gigs, people most common folk don't understand who they're listening to or what they're listening to, and they kind of treat you like wallpaper or like the help, you know, and they'd say, like, just play this song for me, and it's like, you know, but what it teaches you how to learn tunes.
Yeah,
Tunes
well,
you don't want to play, and that in itself is more to learn than having to play some, you know, complex Steve Vai tune. You know, sometimes just playing, like, you know.
Yeah, and there's a certain skill set to it too. It's like,
yeah,
you know, if I'm playing with these guys, I'm playing bass, right? But if I'm doing these other gigs, I have to play bass and keyboard bass and sing.
yeah,
So it requires a lot more, and you got to be able to read music, unless you have it all memorized. But a lot of times you have to read it because it'll be like the first time they're playing the tune or whatever.
But yeah, it's amazing to me how many situations we've been in where musicians with, you know, a fabulous pedigree and a esteemed reputation will find themselves in one of these kind of meat and potato gigs and fall on their face.
well, you know,
Oh yeah.
it's interesting with the wedding gigs. It's like you prep everything to be, you know, letter perfect, and then half the people are drunk and don't pay any attention to you anyway.
yeah, exactly.
It's almost
Well,
like,
but it's also built in because like if you're doing your job and it's grooving, then they're dancing. They're there to party.
the party goes on. But you know what I mean? It's like it's less
Yeah.
it's less pressure than a gig with your own band where everybody's sitting there with their arm crossed going.
Yeah.
"Shoo." Instead, it's, you know, kind of, you're just wallpaper. Very well paid.
Or you're entertainers. Yeah, it's an
Sure,
entertainment.
but it's a different kind of pressure because there's always at least a handful of new tunes you're doing every night. You gotta be prepared to like do, you know, switch directions on the drop of a hat. I mean, it's not.
A walk
I
in
mean-
the park.
Well, plus wedding bands these days,
It's not just it's not the audience that you're worried about. It's doing a good job that you're worried about.
yeah.
You know.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, because in itself, it's like a show. It's not like the old days where it's like, you know, the stereotypical like wedding singer type wedding band. I mean, they're bringing in PA, light, full on in-ear
They're
monitors.
spending close
There's-
to $1 million on some of these weddings.
There's
Yeah.
tracks. I mean,
Insane.
it's like, at least for the high end ones, that's what it is. I mean, there's still the, you know, the other ones where people just show up and, you know, just kind of faking their way through it. But like, if, you know, it's like anything, you know, there's different levels.
Sure. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about improvisation and kind of the nature of it. And, you know, I imagine like, well, with any band that has a big portion of their set where they can improvise, you know, some nights it's amazing and other nights it feels like the landing gear never really got up. So I was just wondering if you guys could talk a bit about, you know, the nature of improv and what makes it successful versus it's kind of iffy.
Well, who wants to go first on that one?
Well, one
yeah.
thing I will say about that is that I think number one, I think we all in this band, and I think in what we bring to other situations, understand that in order for an improvisation to be successful, there has to be a solid grounding to what's happening. You know, we can't be asking questions about where's the groove. I mean, we have to be pushing things, but we all have to have faith about where the time is, where the groove is. We have to trust each other. I think that's a real basic foundation that we have in this band. That gives us a head start a lot of the times, you know. And when that's there, if you're personally not feeling it, then you know it's you, because it's like, God, these guys are giving me a great bed to build on, you know. So if I'm not feeling it, maybe it's time to lay back a little bit. Maybe it's time to just kind of play in the pocket and not be too showy. But as far as improvisation goes, I mean, it's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy thing. There has to be, your basic needs have to be met before you can self-actualize.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's the solo improvisation when someone's soloing, but then there's like the comping improvisation too. Like, some there's sections of the tunes that are worked out. So like, if we're playing unison lines or like, the head part of the tune, like this is how the tune goes. And then there's the part where it is the solo section of the tune, where it could be different, night to night, like as far as note choice and exactly which groove we're playing. But I mean, it usually settles in pretty quick. So like when I listen to like the recordings, like the live recordings, that's one of the things that's pretty fun. It's like, wow, this is totally different than the studio version, but it's equally as cool. But we're doing like slightly different stuff. I mean, we're not like rewriting it completely. And then as far as like soloing, like it's a band full of soloists, but like, for me as a bass player, man, it's like, to solo after, say, Chris Siebold takes a guitar solo, man, I got to be on top of it, or I got to do something that's at least interesting, and not try to match it in the same way. Like I'll do, something that's maybe more bass centric, or maybe not. I mean, like, whenever I have to follow, like even on the studio recording, it's like, all right, so the bass solo is the third solo, but like, Chris Siebold just soloed and so did Vijay, and it's like, man, now what am I going to play? After playing bass the whole time, actually playing groove, and then have to take a solo, it's it can be challenging.
That's when you do the Billy Sheehan thing.
I do pull out some tapping, like I'll like one of my favorite ones to do is like I don't think Billy does this one, but like I'll do like a
that's.
Like some sort of sweeping thing that but on bass.
Yeah, that's what makes me think of somebody like Adam Nitty. He's
right, yeah, that kind
of stuff. Yeah, I think it's
or just like when Eddie died, like almost like I was on that trip, where Eddie was like, so everything was like, everything was like some sort of linear like arpeggiated tapping thing. But I'd sneak it in. I wouldn't do it the whole time, like.
Yeah, well, it could be pretty tasty in the right context. Yeah,
that's a great thing to do on Blue Bossa.
Yeah, it works great on a wedding dinner.
Yeah, right.
A lot of times it's about context. So there have been times where it's like I could just play the most wicked shit here, but it would be totally tacky, so I won't. Do you ever have moments like that?
I
suppose with
of course they have Clemente. Come on.
But
I mean, it always ends up being about whatever the intent is at the time. Like, I think it's different, for each guy, like what they're thinking at the time, or like what they're like what is the emotional content that you're trying to get across. So, sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's ugly, but like it could still be just as good.
I think Clemente's got some smooth dance moves, though. When he gets into it, he's a natural when it comes to making it look cooler when he dances.
I think going along with what Clemente said, like if you're thinking about check me out rather than what's the best thing for the music at the time, you're making the wrong choice.
Sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I was going to just add something to the improv conversation real quick.
Please.
I think that what's important, what I learned from this group is over the time, a few things. I think it just depends on what we were saying, the context, whether to play in or out of time together. And then there's trust, which is huge. And I had to gain people's trust in the band when I was the young squirt getting in the band, learning this style of music. And I think also charisma and certain elements like that go into play, like the entertainment factor, tastefulness of it. How many notes do we want to play a cluster of notes? Do we want to play avant-garde? Do we want to loose, free? Do we want to play with a rhythm section groove so someone else can play over it? You always kind of refer, and I think the discipline part teaches you, and I don't think a lot of people want to admit this because they want to be artists, like as if they're reinventing the wheel or something. This is not something that's been reinvented for a long time in music. I think you have to admit that anything or everything comes from something in some way, shape, or form. So what you have to do is sort of imitate certain artists for a while and then understand and reference each other where you're going with this. If it's a Miles Davis certain era from the 80s or even earlier, or a certain Thelonious Monk kind of vibe, or maybe you're thinking Zappa from the the Starbrooken rehearsals and sessions, or you're thinking like certain things that we can all relate to. We kind of assimilate that and end up making it what we do from that. So improv comes from that, and you got to have improv in all music, in my opinion, and most music that's live with players. But it depends on the situation. I mean, King Crimson is almost like architecture in music and like a modern work of art, and there's not really room for improv. It's Robert Fripp literally playing something completely conceptual as if it's not even a guitar. It's like
it's true. Else. I mean, back in the 70s, they had moments where they just make stuff up for 20 minutes. But nowadays it's harder, that now they got 3 drummers and it's an 8-piece group. So it's like the bigger it is, the less room you have to take chances. It's more scripted, It's
scripted, and
I mean, there's still a few moments.
Though. Holy shit!
You should see Gavin Harrison when he plays that solo in Schizoid, man.
He's on point. So on point. It reminds me of old like classic Bruford.
Oh yeah,
and those cats, man. I saw 3 of them. I think Bill Riflin was the other drummer.
He was, and now it's Jeremy Stacy. And Pat Mastelotto, who's been with them since the 90s when they had the double trio with Bruford. Yeah, and a lot of Gavin, Gavin wrote a lot of books, and some of those inspired some of the stuff that Bruford was doing back in the 90s. So it's kind of a no-brainer that Gavin wound up in King Crimson. He deserved to be with them. He's got too much to offer just to play shoegazing Prague forever. So it's nice to see him hook up with King Crimson.
I think it's important to have some interpretation from you and how you interpret what a master did before. One only little small hang up, I think it's just really, it's almost disappointing or frustrating when in certain genres people insist, like the listeners, that you have to play the note, the solo or the arranged through composed section of a famous solo note for note. Like you have to do it that way. You have to have this drum set, this kind of guitar, this kind of amp. That's just rubbish to me. I mean, I think that Miles Davis was trying to break from that. I mean, he wants people to evolve and be human beings.
Yeah, he talked about that a lot.
And I don't understand why these, and I'm not going to say certain genres, but some of the old school fans or listeners are like, he didn't play that solo right. Especially like, I was going to say Rush, man. Like when you play Rush, I don't think that you're ever going to sound or play exactly like they played it. There's, and even if you tried, it's why. It's like the music is supposed to have some give or take of interpretation, and that can fall in the improvisatory category, in my opinion.
Chris, what's the coolest Rush bass lick? It's the first one that pops in your head.
Probably this one. Let's see if I could play it. That one.
Oh yeah.
But I always like the La Villa Strangiato bass break.
Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah, that. I mean, I remember when I first learned that in high school. Just being able to play it, and then relearning it again much later, after my ears were better and I had some better technique, to see how close I was to the original, and then relearning it again.
Yeah, that's one of their most amazing compositions.
Because there's so many tunes, but those are the ones that maybe because those are the instrumental tunes too.
Sure, there's a little more flashy bass playing in them. Lots of bass solos per se.
Like a Rhapsody.
Yeah, and in fact, I was actually going for more of a Geddy Lee tone on one of the new Kick the Cat, tunes where because he always has just some sort of overdrive on his bass.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going for Gene Simmons or something. That's good. At least with the way your bass looked. or Nick
Detroit Rock City, man.
Have you seen the Gene Simmons Carol Kay bass lesson?
He actually sounds pretty good once she gets him to play it. He was seriously into learning what she was saying to him. And I met her, man. She's a pretty serious educator about how to play bass, and I mean, she's iconic,
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty cool video actually. You could tell the respect he had for her, But I think Gene's a little better than he gets credit for, actually.
Well, when you listen, I was actually
Especially in the Terry Gross interview.
Well, I was a Kiss fan, man. That was another early one. Like I liked Kiss, and part of it was that the bass lines and the tunes were good. The guitar parts weren't as cool. I mean, Ace actually, he was like a blues guitar player, and like when he took leads, those were cool. But the actual guitar parts were kind of like mindless. Like, there was a lot of, because then there'd be singing, but the bass and the drums did all the work.
Yeah, yeah. And just to sing and play at the same time, it's never a walk in the park. When it comes to bass, it's.
Oh yeah, for me, like trying to work on singing and playing at the same time, like the tune that was the defining moment was when I learned how to play.
Come back, you ho.
No, it was it was Day Tripper, man. To play the riff to Day Tripper and sing it. The first time I did it, I stepped on my dick, but then that made me figure it out. Like, how am I going to do this? And then I did, and once I did that, like the rest of the songs came a little bit easier. Like when it was a more complex line.
Dick Tripper.
Such a great riff too. One of my favorite. Just a stone.
Presumably, it came from a big band record. Like it was a riff from a big band recording, and I've nenever heard it, but that's what was told to me.
Well, even Sting kind of stole that. Like, what's that song? Oh My God, you remember that song?
Oh, totally. Yeah, man, I love that tune on Sync.
How's it go?
Is that from Legally Blonde?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Everyone I know is lonely, got so far away.
Yeah.
Great tune. That's a tune that gets overlooked on that record most of the time.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Police tunes.
Yeah, I dig the deep cuts on that record. They don't get mentioned enough.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap it up?
I was hoping that Chris was going to Siebold was able to get in on it, but maybe he's still playing. So
yeah, he says his
I think we
condolences.
got to make sure that he gets his props because he's kind of like he's a feature of the band for sure. We want to make sure that everybody knows about what an amazing musician is.
Well, I wanted to talk to him about working with Garrison Keillor. I used to listen to the Prairie Hum Companion with Garrison Keillor. And
that was one of Chris's all-time favorite gigs to do because it was so pro. You show up. They got the charts. I mean, like if you ever get a chance to see any of his pictures, like how he had the charts laid out, and I mean, you had to be on top of it.
They're playing different music every night. They're playing with all these amazing different guests.
Oh,
yeah, and it wasn't rinky-dink. It wasn't rinky-dink at all.
All world class. And that show kind of changed, once they got Chris Thiele on there. Thiele, excuse me.
Thiele, yeah.
Yeah, different ball of wax, kind of geared for a younger generation. But it didn't last too long. I think that show's over now. So
yeah, I liked it, man. Because just to hear him play.
Yeah, he's amazing. And just to hear him playing like Radiohead and all this stuff that you never would have heard on Garrison's show. A lot of the older fans cried foul. They're like, "Oh, I can't stand this new one." And it's just like, well, are we going to eat powder milk biscuits until we're 100? I'm not.
It's like the Bob Dylan syndrome, calling him Judas when he went electric.
Yeah, I like the music on the old show. I didn't particularly like the shtick that went with it, but the music was top shelf.
Yeah, right. They do all the radio show with
the Noir, Private Eye, and all that stuff. It was okay, but after 20 years, it's like, okay, this is wearing a little thin.
They take the shoes and walk them across like a board, like when someone's walking. Then they got the door and
like the guy from Police Academy got a gig later, going, and all that kind of stuff.
That guy was my favorite.
That sound effects guy, whoever he is a master. I'll give it.
Totally.
Foley.
Some in a recent commercial. Yeah. But to talk about Siebold real quick, I can tell you that I owe a great deal to Chris Siebold. He was literally a mentor of mine when I was a young punk trying to learn jazz in college, and
they were both at Elmhurst College together.
Yeah, and we go way back, and he taught me a whole new world and universe of music. You know, he introduced me to Vinny Colaiuta's solo album, and you know, for drummers, it's like, oh, that's the best album ever. You know, but then there's also like Frank Zappa, a real deep catalog. I don't think I know anyone. I mean, he literally knows. He was the encyclopedia of Frank Zappa for me, and then
He's the
Mike
encyclopedia
Keneally.
of everything he listens to.
Yeah,
He's got a steel trap memory.
and Mike Keneally, who shout out to Mike. I know he's out there somewhere. Who I met Sean here through Mike. Mike is what his music and his albums in the '90s were coming out, and Siebold's like, dude, he'd sit me down and like, check this out, and it just blew my mind, you know, from one night to the next, and show me like old Yes albums that I wasn't aware of. He taught me a lot, and we gigged together throughout. We were like brothers, and I think we have a deep relationship, and there's a fire there. When I play with him, he taught me how to play with fire behind a guitar solo. So I owe a great deal to him. And even as a person, he's like an artist. He's, you know, and through and through. And you know, he's always a personality that comes up for us as Kick the Cat, and he's kind of the face to the name. So yeah,
His solos are
Big
his
ups to him.
trademark.
yeah, much love to him. He sends his regards, by the way.
Okay, well, kudos. I would love to have him on the show sometime. So if you guys want to come back and talk about
man.
stuff once the album's out, let's do it. You know.
Oh, thanks, Sean.
Things
Yeah, thanks, man.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, cool beans. Well, next week, Saturday night, I'm chatting with Jerry Goodman from the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
I got to play with Jerry a couple years.
And Thursday, I'm chatting with Carl Verheyen. I don't know if you remember him, if you ever read the guitar magazines back in the 80s, but he's a brilliant player, and he transcribed a great deal of the stuff that we saw in those mags back then, and great instructor as well. So got a new album called Sundial that's really cool. We're checking out. So y'all's album will be out again in June. What date?
18th.
18th. Okay, and it's called Gurgle.
And you can keep your eye out for we're just releasing like video singles of us playing
Prior to that.
song,
Yeah.
leading up to that on YouTube and on the on Facebook.
Yes, on our socials, keep an eye out for us.
Yeah, this is really a rebirth for us. So we're kind of building the social thing from the ground up. So if everybody could, anyone who's interested, you know, subscribe to our YouTube and like us on Instagram.
I will definitely share those as they come down the pike. And if you guys could share this once I get it uploaded to YouTube, I'd be very grateful as well.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I mean, I love these interviews. I watch a lot of them. I'm a fan, so I dig it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, man, it's been quite a year. You know, it's like
Shit, yeah.
I don't know who's coming next. You know? And everybody's like, you got such an amazing roster. And it's like, yeah, but for every one person that says yes, there's 5 that ignore me.
Right.
It's like pushing that rock up the mountain, you know, but, you know.
True.
So thank you guys for taking the time to chat. And, yeah. And again, if y'all haven't subscribed yet, drop by YouTube. It's /Soul, SOAL, Night Live. So, all right, you guys, well, take care.
Thanks, Sean.
Be in touch,
Thank
and
you, man.
I'll talk to you soon. All right, take care. Have a good week.
You too, Sean. Thanks, man.
Right on.
Take care. See you guys.